My name is Alana Cook, and I am with the Alana Cook Show on BlackBerry at FMRadio.com and BlackBerryTalkRadio.com. I'm here with Jim Mars, and we're having a conversation at the UFO conference over here in the UFO conference of the Ozarks. And thank you for coming on the show, Mr. Mars.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. I have a question for you right out the gate. I read a story last night, 60 Minutes to report on 28 pages said to link 9/11 to Saudi Arabia. Can you give us your take on that?
Well, of course. That was the congressional study, one of the first ones that they actually did on 9/11. And needless to say, if you go back and think about it, 17 of the 19 hijackers are Saudis. In fact, none of them were Afghans, none of them were Iraq. So why we attacked those countries, I do know why, but it had nothing to do with 9/11. And in Afghanistan, we attacked Afghanistan supposedly because Osama bin Laden was there, but he wasn't. But we did that so we could get the poppy fields back into production. The Taliban, who I have nothing particularly good to say about, nevertheless were religious fanatics. And according to European media, that right before 9/11, they had reduced the poppy crops, the heroin trade, if you will, by 95%. And of course that slows down the flow of drug money through the banking system, so we couldn't have that. So we had to invade Afghanistan. Within a year, our media was reporting that the poppy fields were back in full production. We also wanted to put strong arm to the Taliban, who were governing Afghanistan, because they wanted to put a gas and pipeline through there, and they were asking a little bit more than we wanted to pay to do that. So, and that's in the works now too. Iraq, of course, was Saddam Hussein supposedly was the new Hitler, and was had weapons of mass destruction, and was going to drop an A-bomb on us within about 6 weeks. And of course that turned out not to be true at all. But what did turn out to be true is that we got control over their oil supply, and that's what it's all about. This goes back to plans made even back during the Gerald Ford administration with Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and the neocons, and they were saying we need to put more military strength into the Middle East so we can gain control over the oil supply. It's always about the money. It's the old journalist adage, follow the money.
Right.
And that's exactly what it was all about. So then all of a sudden, in September of 2000, the neocons issued a report called the Project for a New American Century, and in there they said, well, we really want to put more troops in the Middle East, gain control over the oil supplies, but we need to crack down a little bit on liberty, a little bit too much democracy and liberty in the United States. And they said, but this report says, but that's going to be pretty tough to pass through the American people, unless there is a catastrophic and cataclysmic event like a new Pearl Harbor. A year later, they got it. It's called the attacks of 9/11. And everything that they were wanting for, their little wish list, all came true. And it's still coming true. And somehow in there, we had this Saudi involvement. Most of the claimed hijackers were Saudis. And why are they covering that up? Well, because the closest business and social friends to the Saudis were the Bush family. And of course, Bush Jr., who had been selected president in 2000, that suited his purposes and his neocon friends. And so they classified 28 pages, which is still classified. We can't find out exactly what was the connection between Saudi Arabia and the 9/11 attacks. We just know that it fulfilled Bush's agenda. And I think in a so-called free democracy, we should have access to that report.
In your opinion, there's a big movement for disclosure going on social media.
On UFOs?
On not just UFOs, but of the truth in general. Since that, Edward Snowden, pardon me.
I hate to quote Jack Nicholson, but you can't handle the truth. But we can. I think we can.
I think we can too. And I mean, even as a journalist, I've had people in intelligence and different arenas come to me and tell me, I think the American public is ready
Right.
And here's what's really going on. And, my question to you is, you've been doing this for a long time. So do you think 2016 will be the year that the dam breaks?
I think 2016 could be the year of disclosure, but probably not. For one thing, I'm pretty convinced that the people who say, well, if we can just get to the right congressional committee, or if we can get the right person in as president, they're going to hold a press conference and they're going to go, okay, folks, here's who really killed Kennedy. Here's the whole truth about the UFOs. Ain't going to happen, okay? Number one, in the case of the UFOs, can you imagine any politician standing up and saying, okay, we've lied to you for 75 years. Here's what's really going on. No, they'll never do that. But disclosure is coming, and it will come, but it's all going to be up to them. If you stop and think about it, all they got to do is just come and hover over a major city long enough for the news crews to get out there with their cameras, and the game's up. Everybody then knows it's real and they're here. Of course, we all know that anyway, particularly people who attend these conferences like here in the Ozarks. But knowing and being able to prove something is not always the same thing.
Right. Can you tell the American people a little bit about what your latest project is and what you're speaking about today at the conference?
At the conference, I'm talking about remote viewing, and
Okay.
A lot of people know that. A lot of people don't know that. Remote viewing was really, I was brought up I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and science was everything, and we were going to go to space, we were going to colonize the moon, and everybody, the heroes were the astronauts, and everybody was concerned with science and technology, and yet, all of a sudden I find out the U.S. Army is practicing psychic warfare. They have trained intelligence officers who sit in chairs and cast their mind out and go and look at stuff that was happening over in the old Soviet Union or in China or wherever, And to me, that just sounded absolutely bizarre. I said, this can't be. I said, what a story. I mean, number one, it's either not real, in which case this is the biggest waste of taxpayer money I've ever heard of, or it is real, in which case, holy cow, this is an evolutionary step for humankind, okay? Well, it's real. It's very real. In fact, I attribute the end of the Cold War to the psychic programs on both sides of the Iron Curtain, because the Cold War was built on secrecy. We didn't know exactly what the Soviets had. We weren't exactly sure what their intentions were. Generally, we're all being told they wanted to take over the world, okay? They didn't know exactly what we had, and they didn't know exactly what our intentions were. But when both sides began to study and perfect the techniques for remote viewing, psychic viewing, then they were able to go in, look at our secret places. We looked at their secret places. They looked at our weapon. We looked at theirs. And they found out, whoa, they got everything they say they have. And they don't particularly plan on invading the Soviet Union. In America, we says, well, they don't have near the power we thought they had, and they're not particularly interested in invading us. And the Cold War went away. So remote viewing is really an incredible thing. And as incredible as that was, then for the leaders in the Pentagon and for the political leaders, they weren't about to send these guys to look for UFOs. That's just too silly, okay? But every time the remote viewers that were trained by the U.S. Army were told to go and look in the upper atmosphere for high-flying, high-performance aircraft so that we could see what kind of new planes maybe Russia or China were testing, they all came into contact with UFOs and their non-human occupants. So I'm going to be talking about remote viewing aliens.
And have you heard of Voice of God weapons?
Oh, yes.
Speaking in,
yeah, or God, what is it, the rail, God's rails or something like that?
Yeah. It's something that I ran into in my research.
Mm-hmm.
Just by the people that I knew and things like that.
Well, so see, there's treaties that prevent weapons from being placed in space. Doesn't mean that we're not doing it. Doesn't mean enemies are not doing it.
Right.
But we have treaties that said you're not supposed to do this, and so I think that they've been circumvent in putting missiles or intercontinental type ballistic missiles up into space. But it didn't say anything about these I call them rail guns, but that's not exactly right. It's called God's nails or something like that.
Yeah, I don't.
These are just basically long rocket type things, but they're not rocket propelled.
Right.
Okay, it's like you drop them. It's like you up on top of the Empire State Building and you drop a brick. You know, the brick in and of itself is not a powerful weapon, but when you drop it from the Empire State Building, hit somebody on the head, they kill them, right? But these things, they can just drop, they can pinpoint them, they can drop them, and then they act like a missile, but without power. But when they hit, they strike with, you know, the power of a meteorite or whatever. So, yeah, we do have weapons up there.
And what's your theory, or what is your take on the terror attacks that are going on right now? Is it related to ISIS, or what's going on in the world? Like,
what's
why
going on
is
in
it?
the world? Who's behind the terrorist attacks?
Yeah, who's
right?
behind the terrorist attacks? Why?
If you'll go all the way to 9/11, and I don't want to get into all of that,
Right.
except 9/11 basically was an inside job. You'll never convince any knowledgeable person that a cleric in a cave with a laptop can have his minions overcome a $400 billion defense system, capture 4 airliners, turn off their transponders at the same time, unerringly guide them across country for hundreds of miles to specifically hit little targets. You know, and come on, folks. You know, this was at least an inside job. For one thing, you need to take a look at the role of Israel and all of that. There's now undisputable evidence that there were some Israelis. You had the dancing Israelis who were arrested, thrown out of the country. They said they were there to record and document the event, which means they had foreknowledge. You had the Ondigo messaging system that was run out of Israel that warned people don't go to Lower Manhattan that morning. There's just too many evidences that there were people who knew exactly what was going to happen. Now, who's behind all that? Okay, if you'll go and look at every so-called terrorist event that's been reported since 9/11, at the heart of it, you'll find an FBI informant or a CIA informant. Okay, again, false flags. The one that really stands out in my mind was the gang of Florida youth who were going to go to Chicago and blow up the Sears Tower. And when you really stop and peel that back and look at it, they were a bunch of young street thugs, didn't have any sense, didn't have any money, but they fell in with an FBI informant who got them all jacked up and said, let's go do that. And they said, okay. And then he busted them all, you know, so they could claim that they were fighting terrorism. And all that's happened is that every terrorist event, there's always a government informant involved. And yet when you go to the airport, they got to grope you down because, you know, even 2-year-old kids and 80-year-old grandmothers, because we're supposed to be so afraid of terrorists. But I'll end the whole moral terrorism thing with one simple question. If there is truly an international gang of terrorists that's bent on slipping weapons of mass destruction into our country and destroying our freedom and democracy, how come they won't guard the border?
And that's Jim Marsh. Thank you very much.